A Greater Manchester police officer is under criminal investigation for assault after footage surfaced appearing to show a constable kicking and stamping on the head of a man at Manchester Airport. Let's discuss the latest on this with Yunus Lunat. He's an employment and discrimination lawyer. Yunus, there's been more context that's sort of drip-fed out over the last couple of days about this incident. And I guess as we get drips and drabs of more context, it's a reminder that we don't have the full context perhaps yet until a full investigation's carried out. But I guess there's an overriding question, which is, can there ever be any context to excuse the type of behaviour we saw from the police officer that involved kicking somebody who, at least eventually, was already motionless and calm?
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I think you've really picked on the main point of discussion here, really, is initially what we've had all along is there is a context. We need to wait for the full facts to become apparent. But from my perspective, putting a legal hat on is, can there ever be, what we've got now is perhaps a context to the background, but can there ever be a defence or a justification for a police officer to behave in such a way against a suspect, let's say, who's been rendered incapacitated and by all accounts, no longer appearing to be a threat? That's the issue here. And secondly, for me, and when we're in a climate of politicians, certain media commentators who's talking of culture wars, whether these protests, the harm that these protests have caused to community relations, and I speak as being involved in the Batley Grammar School protests here, being representative, the legal representative for the parents involved, and the damage that caused to Batley, which we still haven't recovered from, as to whether these protests could perhaps have been avoided had more information been available earlier on. Because if you look at the latest video that's now become available, initially the leaders and the politicians were saying, we can't share everything with you. There is more information. Be patient. But nobody's now saying that this latest release of information has prejudiced any investigation. So my question is, could this have been released earlier? If it was released earlier, then perhaps, in my view, these demonstrations could have been avoided and the community relations could have been, the damage to community relations could have been avoided as well.
So I'm really interested in that. Is your implication from, I know you said at the top that there's no context really for why somebody should be kicked by a police officer once they're on the floor and already restrained. Are you suggesting, though, that there might be some kind of excuse for the behaviour that might have diminished the reaction if everyone had known about it, that sometimes tension rises? I'm just trying to work out what you're implying there.
No, what I'm saying is, it provides a context and background as to why the officer has gone in afterwards and kicked and stamped. It provides a context, but certainly I struggle to find any circumstances under which a police officer is justified legally in behaving in such a way. It provides a context, which what I'm saying is, and these are what the politicians seem to be saying, it provides an explanation as to the reaction of the apparent excessive force that's been used. But no, it does not provide, and I struggle to find any circumstances in which it can provide a justification or an excuse or a defence.
I think Andy Burnham said it would have been helpful if this video clip had come out, the second video clip had come out earlier too. Who in your eyes is responsible for not giving as much context as might have been possible early on? And to wrap things up for us, what does it take to heal the tensions that exist in these communities and I guess the questions that people have in their mind towards the police when these sort of situations do arise?
This will be a matter for the inquiry as to who had possession of the secondary information that's come out. Certainly it's concerning if that was in the possession of the authorities and it wasn't released, because in my view, had that have been released earlier, then strong voices in the community could have discouraged protests and avoided the probably 3 days of protests that were held, and the damage that causes to community relations. So that's a matter of inquiry as to where that information has come from. But what is also indicative is that in all of these protests, those people that were involved, or certainly their legal representatives, their families, were apparently not part or heavily involved in these protests. So perhaps that was indicative of the background to this. And there, in my view, there's probably a lack of strong community voices as well, taking ownership and leadership here. I always come back to it's a matter of leadership. And I come back to the Batley situation. Had more information have been shared earlier, then in my view, those protests could have been avoided, or certainly strong voices in the community could have discouraged those protests. And we have to keep living in those communities. And it doesn't help when you've got certain politicians that are using these sort of incidents to stroke up culture wars and to the advantage of their the agendas. And that's the sadly the climate that we now live in.
Yunus Lunat, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
GP